Yeah. So a lot of things happened at the same time. So our team here completely reworked the atmospheric simulation, I would say, for Flight Simulator 2024. And among the improvements are the horizon line, which is fixed, and it improves the way the scattering works. And at the same time, there was this thread where people found, hey, there's the values of the ozone are not perfectly matched, and so what we did is actually, so the new engine works differently. So it's not something where we can exactly match the values, but what we did is we implemented them back into 2020. And what we found is that then when we reviewed and tested the build a little bit, we found that the scenery being already a little bit greenish before the change, that got worse, right? The scene was with that fix for the ozone layer, the world was exaggeratedly green. And so we went back and checked, and again in the reworked atmospheric scattering, we have a different sun color, which is more accurate, and we moved that back also into 2020. And so here you can see this is it's the daytime, so you see much more the effect of the sun color. So old and new, maybe you can switch forward back a little bit. You will see that it's not as green. I mean, when you stare at one image, you sort of don't see it, but when you switch, you see, oh yeah, okay. The old one was really greenish, bluish, unrealistic, and the new one is actually realistic colors. And if you continue, you can see the effect of the ozone layer, which is really visible in the evening. So here the old is very pink, as it's been for years in 2020, and the new one is much more realistic with still some pink, but a lot more blue and realistic colors. I've seen a lot of people so I've continued to read and we've continued to analyze what people say after this was out in beta, and people were trying to find the values in the data of the executable and they were surprised that they didn't find the exact same values, and that's normal because they are not I think it's about what we try to do is to have the same effect. So I think the result should be the same than with the values that you were putting, but because of the way we did the system, it's just it's as if it was scaled completely differently. So that's why you can't find exactly the same value, but the effect should be the same. It's not like we changed, made it more red, more blue or something. It's the same result, even though the value is not the same. Voila.
But I would say thank you for the thread.
Yeah.
It was an inspiration. So hey, this is us working together. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting. So there's been quite a few times, I think, on this Q&A, and there was a lot of forum posts about it. A request to improve ground handling, and I think I've already touched about this. And every time I said, yeah, this is for later, this is for later, this is for later, and this is something we started tackling now. So basically, there's been a lot of rewriting of the physics engine in 24, and we found a way to bring back some of the effects into 2020. So basically, why we did have issues with the ground handling and collisions on the ground. The reason is basically that the ground simulation, the ground collision is still very close to what it was in FSX. Basically, you have a suspension which allows every wheel to go up and down. And the thing we changed is that basically we fixed it so that you will not slide down a hill if you're on a slope, because FSX had only flat terrain runways, and now we can have slopes and whatever, and you need to be able to stop if you brake, and you don't want to have your plane sliding down the hill. So actually the only thing we fixed is that, but and I think we made the suspension more detailed. You can have more different, there's more parameters, but in the end, it's still the same thing. Every wheel can just go up and down. And if you look at something like a Cessna, or even worse, if you have 4 contact points, when you have 3 contact points with the ground, and the only thing you can do is go up and down, it really restricts your movement a lot, right? The whole plane can go up and down, but even tilting is difficult because when you project the points, they will not just go up and down, they will go to the side a little bit or forward or whatever. Having only a suspension restricts the movement of the aircraft. What happens in real life? Well, in real life, you only have a suspension, but in real life, the tire is extremely flexible and can go to the side. It can twist and it can bend, and the whole aircraft is flexible, right? If you look at the Cessna the whole fuselage is going to twist by a few millimeters. That's enough to allow the suspension to work freely and for the plane to go up and down. And also, it dampens when you're in a curve on the plane, or maybe just there's a gust of wind. The aircraft will absorb some of the energy, and you will not immediately lose traction. So here's a video which shows before and after, and this is shot in 2020, and it will be shipping in Simulate 15. And you can see the difference before and after. So it's not it's exactly the same plane. It's exactly the same suspension. We didn't change anything. The only thing which is new is that there's now a new parameter which allows to define how flexible the airframe is. And this is what allows, you can see on the right, everything is less stiff, right? The suspension actually works more, and this is how it should work, right? On the right, here you can see, so this is just an idle engine on this screenshot. And here I'm twisting left and right with the tail. You can see that on the before screens, every shaking was going up and down, and it was very small. The idle aircraft on the ground is supposed to shake a little bit more. And on the new simulation, you can see it's very realistic because the whole plane now can move sideways, and so all the shaking is present. Basically, a side effect of this is that you get now the cabin or camera shake or whatever effect in the airplane when you're on the cockpit, on the ground, when you're taxiing, because they were already there, right? The simulator simulates the engine torque, which makes the plane shake. The CFD or the airflow simulates all the bumps in the air. When you're on the ground has bumps, but it was very much dampened away because of this stiffness of the suspension simulation. And so now, with that, when you're taxiing, that's why I added before and after wing view. You can see the wing is shaking 10 times more at least, with exactly the same suspension settings, because we get this flexibility of the airframe. And better control when you land. You would have less this, like, especially when you arrive on a crab, when you arrive sideways, you will not have this effect like on a rail where you're going to shoot off. And even you can see the bounciness. When you bounce, it's a lot more lively because the whole airframe, well, if you can twist and bend, it also means there's some elasticity, and it will basically store and send back some energy. You get a little bit more bounces, or if you do bad landing, you will bounce a bit more. So this is being worked on. It doesn't change any settings. Plane makers don't have to change anything. We'll make it a default setting, which should work for all aircraft, and then there will be a way it should not break anything, and there will be a way to make it bigger or smaller per aircraft, or take it away if really someone doesn't like it. But it should not break anything or change anything. It works exactly like before for everything else.
We have a couple of questions, Seb, about this. Just to confirm, you mentioned this is going to be in Sim Update 15.
Yes.
Okay. And someone else is wondering, how does this affect airliners and airliners from third parties?
It's exactly the same thing. So it does not change any settings of the ground, of the wheels, of anything here. Mm-hmm. It does not basically. I think my intention right now is to have a similar setting for every aircraft, because it's not scale dependent or weight. It's the setting is it doesn't have any unit. Mm. I think if during beta testing we find that it does break something, either what we can do is default it to 0 and then make it added to all our aircraft. Mm-hmm. I tested quite a few airliners. It's an effect which is less an issue on larger aircraft. I see quite a lot of impact on this aircraft here. On a larger aircraft like an airliner, it did not like when I braked, I did not see like a giant shake or something like this, because on the larger aircraft there was not so much. I mean, the suspension was already allowed to work a lot more, but we will test this. I think very probably a default setting, which is going to be like the default elasticity of a metal, is going to be enough, and maybe for some aircraft we need more. But the default setting will already, all we need is a few, I mean, if you look at, if you zoom in, the elasticity is really just 1 or 2 millimeters, right? And it's almost not visible, but that's enough to make the suspension actually work freely in all dimensions.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's such a small impact. It just makes it frees the suspension really.
Did you see the helicopter thing, Seb? Somebody's asking if the skids will also be using this.
Yes, so this is just a first look. I think on a future Q&A, whenever this is ready, I will do a lot more videos. And obviously, so what is really cool on a helicopter is that the cabin now vibrates. And for example, if you go full, it's not the rudder, but if you push the foot full on one side, you actually feel the whole airframe twisting because the tail wants to go on one side. I also, when you're barely when you have like almost enough lift to take off, you get a lot more like a sort of wiggle on the when you're on the ground and not hovering. It doesn't change that much. You have just the vibration of the cabin, which is now there. But if you're almost lifting off, it's a lot richer than before. Like before, the skid would just either slide or not, and now it can sometimes sort of like like almost like a real surface, but you know when it skids and it just has it touches sometimes, so it vibrates basically more. But yeah, people here have done a lot of flight testing on the Cabri, say that it's a lot more realistic to have this cabin vibration.
And
again, for SU-15, because somebody's asking. This we're doing a little preview here. SU-14 is obviously coming to an end for shipping in a few days.
And maybe one more question about this before we go to the next one. It was, will this affect how my landings feel? Taxiing?
Yes. So it really depends on. I think if you were perfectly landing and there was basically what it does is that when the wheel is very strongly constrained, previously it was instantly propagating the whole constraint over the entire airframe, because the airframe basically was a rigid body, and when the wheel does something, instantly the entire body moves. But in real life, that's not what happens. When the wheel moves, when the left wheel moves, before the right wingtip moves, there's gonna be a very small delay. It's gonna propagate through the body, which is not really rigid, and this small delay works like it has a little it stores energy, and then the wave is gonna bounce back, and then it's gonna return the energy. So this is what happens, and we made it extremely small because all we needed was a few millimeters to free the suspension. People can tune it up if they want on the aircraft. What it does is that when the wheel was hitting hard, before you would instantly skid and sometimes lose control, or it was a bit weird. Sometimes on taking off, it would take the crosswind weirdly. It makes it better because now there is this slight delay of propagation, and it will dampen up when there was just a spike, for example. So overall, but it has the other effect, which is there's a little bit of storing of energy. So the elasticity may also sometimes make you have more rebound than before. So that's what you can see on the right here. It's a little bit more shaky. That's how it should be, because the suspension of the aircraft has quite a little bit of shake, right? It's just a metal suspension, and you can see on the current version what is out there, the suspension doesn't really work, right? It's like, and it can't give back the energy. So it will affect a little bit. I think it will only make it better and more realistic. And there's going to be a parameter anyway, just in case anything goes wrong.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Seb, for that. We will move on to our next topic.